Well, Max, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, this is really exciting because you are the star of The Most Reluctant Convert, the untold story of C.S. Lewis, and you are among a number of actors playing C.S. Lewis. What was that experience like to portray such an amazing individual in the Christian world?
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's been a spiritual guide. Uh, I'm an adult convert to Christianity, and Lewis has helped me to navigate the Christian faith in a way that's deep, that's profound, uh, that is inspiring. So in a sense, he keeps me pursuing uh, the eternal city. Uh, Here we have no continuing city. We await the one to come. And so we press on toward the goal to win the prize that God has called us heavenward in Christ Jesus. Lewis helps me to stay on track.
So that must have been an honor to have that opportunity when there, and for me as well. Mere Christianity was such a transformational book, I think, for millions upon millions of believers. But as a young person reading that and encountering the amazing thoughts and perspectives he had, but it must have been for you a special joy to be able to help bring that individual's, to bring him to life in a new way to new audiences.
Yes, yes. Well, we've been living with Lewis on stage for many years. We're based in New York. We're primarily a theatrical production company, and we've produced theatrical adaptations of Lewis's work for the past 20 years. Now, Lewis never wrote for the theater, so we've had to take his writings and translate it to theater. But and that's certainly a challenge. In order to do that, you definitely have to get inside and underneath his work, and and to me, the big idea with Lewis is he really concentrates on spiritual warfare. Um, Screwtape is about spiritual warfare from the demon's point of view, how temptation keeps us from moving forward. And then we did a stage adaptation of that. And and then The Great Divorce, which is our most recent one, uh, is about spiritual warfare from sort of the heavenly point of view, and that how we resist the promptings of conscience, the dictates of conscience, or how we resist the promptings of the Holy Spirit. And Lewis tended to equate this with his conversion experience, that these were things holding him back. And so that prompted us to look at his memoirs, Surprised by Joy, the shape of his early life, which is in many ways the most thorough exploration of Lewis's conversion from hard-boiled atheist, a vigorous debunker, kind of on the level of Christopher Hitchens, because he had those rhetorical gifts, to become what Walter Hooper described as the most thoroughly converted man he'd ever met.
What now? And as you said, and I've seen the Screwtape letters, such an amazing show. How, you've looked at this for a long time. You've been obviously very acquainted with C.S. Lewis for a long time. What has most surprised you about him as an individual, as a person, in light of all the time you've had a chance to explore his life?
Yeah, that's a good question. He's such a paradox, because in many ways a very private man, and yet in his writings he's so transparent, uh, and so you you really can live his spiritual life after him, in terms of his own battles. He shows us the way. He's almost like the first wave of soldiers that go into battle, and they take all the hits, and then you come in the second wave, say, okay, don't go there, go here, and I think that's his great gift. In addition to that, you mentioned Mere Christianity. Not only does he explore things spiritually and emotionally, but he ties it together uh, intellectually, so that there's no bifurcation of the spiritual, the emotional, and the intellectual. I mean, the secular world wants us to bifurcate that, and I think I really honestly think that the way to reach uh, a new generation who have wrongfully dismissed Christianity primarily because they don't understand it, because they've seen counterfeits of it, uh, is to show the three aspects: the emotional, the spiritual, and the intellectual, as working together.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and he did that, so well throughout his work and throughout his life, and so it's an incredible time to be putting this forward. Let's talk about the film and the reaction. The reaction has been pretty amazing. What has it felt like to sort of watch the success that has come over the last few weeks?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been a wonderful surprise in that it was only scheduled for a one night only event on November 3rd, and we did so well on November 3rd. They extended it, added showings through November 7th, and then they extended it to November 18th, and then we had such a good week, November 18th, which ended yesterday, uh, that we're hearing rumblings, and this is all the decision of the movie chains. It's we get invited to stay, because they don't want to use up their screens for nothing. And in fact, early on, they didn't think anybody would want to see this movie. Their expectations were really quite low. But on the other hand, it's very interesting because God has kind of humbled us in another way, because one of the mistakes that emerged was when we delivered the film to the movie theaters. There was a mistake in terms of showing uh, the making of. When you do event cinema, you have to show bonus content. So we intended to show the making of after the movie. Instead, it was played before the movie, and to me, it gives it's not really relevant before the film. It's more relevant after the film, after you've seen it. How do they make it? So we kind of gave away a little bit. So that's been humbling, because there's always some mistakes that
There's always
yeah,
something,
there's
right? I
always
mean, there's
something.
always something.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's detracted from the story of what Lewis. He went from vigorous debunker of Christianity. He lost his mother to cancer at the age of 9. Um, he had a terrible relationship with his father, which he regretted to the end of his days. And he also experienced the butchery of being in the trenches of World War I. And he came to the conclusion after that either there's no God behind the universe, a God who's indifferent to good and evil, or worse, an evil God. Uh, and then through a long series of relationships with the movie details, people like J.R.R. Tolkien and Owen Barfield and Hugo Dyson and others, uh, he realized that his argument against God was that the universe was so cruel and unjust. And then he asked himself, well, where did I get this notion of cruel and unjust? I call a line crooked because I have some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing the universe with when I called it cruel and unjust? And that pushed him over the edge to belief in theism, more than just belief in God of the fathers, but God of the philosophers, but more like he says, my religion was like that of the Jews. He believed in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who appeared in the burning bush, who was a consuming fire, and he realized that he owed his allegiance to the God who created him, who made him, but he couldn't understand Jesus. He didn't know where Jesus fits in, and and so it was through an extraordinary conversation, which I think our film captures pretty well, between Tolkien and Lewis, that the importance of Jesus is expressed very, very clearly, and that revolutionized Lewis's understanding of Christianity, and was the forerunner to his famous trilemma that either Jesus is who he says he is, or he's a liar, a lunatic, or a fraud. But let's not have any patronizing notion of him being this great human teacher. He did not leave that option open to us, nor did he intend to. So all of that, I think, is pretty clearly articulated in our movie.
Yeah, I mean, what an age-old struggle. This is what we all deal with, right? Death and sorrow and pain and wondering. I mean, so many people have gone through that same journey, and that's what makes it so timeless. I mean, this is really the journey he went through in discovery of who God is, and then finding Christianity in that process. That's the struggle we all can relate to. So it's really an incredible thing to me that where we are right now in such a broken and chaotic culture, that this film, it doesn't really shock me that this is doing well, because people are looking for that hope. They're looking for that answer and that solution. And this is a film that would appeal to people whether they're Christians or not, because there's something there, that sort of life change and transformation that makes people wonder why,
Yeah.
right? And they want to dive into that. So what for you is success for this film? You know, we could talk
Well,
about money
I
and all
think the
that.
fact that we were able to get these ideas out to a very much larger, wider audience. I mean, just exactly what you said about people searching, and the issue of evil and suffering, and one of the ideas that emerges in this film, you know, at least uh, at least the start of the idea is, the how do you deal with pain and suffering. Uh, Lewis came to the conclusion that Christianity didn't solve the problem of pain; it created it. And I go, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" And he goes, "It's because if you have, pain and suffering is not a problem unless you have an expectation that ultimate reality is righteous and good. Because if pain would be no problem if in Lewis's mind, the materialist view that we're just a product of atoms colliding in skulls, physics and biochemistry, then evil and suffering and injustice and wickedness is the natural byproduct of a aimless, capricious universe. So I think what Lewis is saying he said it to himself, and he says it to everyone else. We're all concerned with the problem of pain and the problem of evil, but who has a real response to it? And of course, the Christian gospel leads us to a God who endured pain and suffering. So I think it's very, very compelling for contemporary audiences.
Well, listen, I so appreciate you taking the time today and taking us through C.S. Lewis's journey and your journey for so long now, being able to bring these stories to life, but doing it in kind of an innovative way here that has really captured people's attention. So I appreciate it.
Well, it's a delight to be on your program. Thank you for having me.